Thanks, everyone. I shared this morning in our exec session, but it is so cool and surreal to see us filling out Arcadian Court today with our second annual Everyday AI conference. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for being here. My name's Jagrup Gill. I lead customer success here at Dataiku. And fun fact, I think I'm the highest tenured Canadian Dataiker at Dataiku. If anyone wants to object, you can, but I'm pretty sure that's true. I like to say I'm the oldest Dataiker, but that's not true. Sorry, Doug just said he's the oldest Dataiker. But I was also our first customer success person at Dataiku in Canada. So it gives me such great pleasure to see the room filled today, our customer community grow. And one of our OG customers is going to join me on stage today. So my dear colleague Nigel just went through how the return on AI is being measured. And now we're going to have some real talks. So please join me in welcoming two very esteemed customers, Tejsbir Singh from Bank of Montreal and Laurasp Saifi from Reach. So I say they're very special customers because Tejsbir and BMO are one of the OGs. They put up with me for a very long time. And Lo is a return customer. So he couldn't have enough of us at his last employer, and he came back for more, so thank you. So Tejsbir and Lo, I'd love to start by having you both introduce yourselves. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about what your organizations do, how you're structured, how mature they are, and what your specific role is. And Lo, I'm going to start with you.
Me, sure. So my name is Laurasp Saifi. I am the Senior Vice President of Technology at a company called Reach. What Reach does is a merchant of record. If you don't know what a merchant of record is, you can think of it as we enable cross-border transaction for local merchants. So if you're just a local merchant and you're selling it to Canada, our company opens the financial doors for you to try and transact anywhere in the world and expand your customer base. A bit about the structure. So I manage everything from development to data to cybersecurity. I would say our data team is one of the most mature teams for a company our size that I've seen. We have an array of people from data management specialists to data engineers to data scientists, data analysts, et cetera, et cetera. The data team makes up about a third of our technology organization.
A third?
A third.
That's impressive. And I love that the size of your organization does not denote maturity. So thank you for sharing that. And Tejsbir?
Hi, so Tejsbir Singh. I work for Bank of Montreal, so hopefully I don't have to explain what one of the 5 big banks do. My title is mouthful, but essentially the role is that the smart folks at the bank who are extracting insights out of data don't have to talk to anybody else except my team. Right, so within tech and ops world, my team should be able to serve everything. Now, Lo sort of thinks that, is that a real job? It doesn't exist in smaller organizations, and it doesn't need to be. But just to set the context, BMO has 14 different chief data analytics officers. Right, so every line of business has their own chief data analytics officer. My team's role is that they use consistent source of data, consistent tooling, so everybody's singing from the same songbook. But the challenge comes is the level of maturity is very different. So that's why a function like mine exists.
And it's a very important function. If there are any customers in the room who have ever asked me, Jag, what should our operating model look like? Or what should our COE look like? Spoiler alert, I pretty much just copied everything BMO's doing. I think your hub and spoke model is truly the best way to drive change, scale technology through the organization, but also make sure it's being done in the right way. So kudos to you guys. Okay, so I'd love to start by going back to the beginning of the journey and telling us a little bit about why you decided to partner with Dataiku and what kind of led to the decision making. And Tejsbir, I'm going to start with you this time.
So I take no credit. So BMO's been using Dataiku for about 6 years. I've been in seat for 3. But the reason why, from what I learned, was very simple, right? It was buy versus build. The world was moving towards more open source sort of technology being used for data science. As an old bank, we were using our friends from North Carolina a lot. So that's how it was introduced. What we've been able to do is sort of expand that. So to get the consistency that I was talking about, we defined this journey from data to actionable insights as a standard for whatever level of maturity you are at, right? With stages of discovery, prepping the data, visualizing the data, using it for predictive analytics, using it for prescriptive analytics. And then how do we have multiple personas go through this journey consistently? And what role that Dataiku plays is sort of the coders and clickers can coexist. And there's the ability to forward integrate and backward integrate in this journey. I think that has driven the adoption beyond the initial use cases.
Yeah. I think what's really key here is that defining the journey of the user, where you guys have joined very early on. But I love what you shared around, standardization and operationalization, because I think you guys do that really well. Lo, how about you?
Do you have data scientists here? Anyone? Okay, quite a few. Okay, well, I was one of you guys 10, 20 years ago trying to write gradient descent functions in C++ and wanting to jump out the window because I have to manage my models and how am I going to do this? So since 20 years ago, we finally had libraries that did stuff for us, so I had to code less and worry about pointers less. And funny story, in Blackline Safety, which was the first company that I brought over Dataiku, I was sitting around ranting to my data science team about how the business value of the projects that we can undertake in almost anything, in any of the low-hanging fruit, does not outweigh the overhead cost of operating machine learning models for a long period of time. When I say a long period of time, I mean, you got to retrain stuff when the underlying conditions change, when your outcomes change, and how if I want to build something, a product that lasts for a pretty long time, you just have to keep people on it. Everywhere from DevOps engineers, cloud engineers, MLOps, data scientists. And I'm like, oh my God. That's when we came up with the idea of Google searching if there's a platform out there that does this. I take credit for that Google search idea. And we found Dataiku. And back then, they weren't as mature as they were. But quickly, it became clear to me the value of managing your models, promoting models, demoting models, retraining things, not having to build a gigantic MLOps and a DevOps team to be able to take models to prod, and they no longer live on your laptop like they did in all of my 20s. It was a no-brainer when you added the cost of that platform, removed the overhead, suddenly things made financial sense. And that's when we actually started using the tool at the last place.
Yeah, thank you. No brainer. I love that. Also, shout out to our digital marketing team for being top of that Google list. That's really good SEO right there. But I'm seeing so many common threads of what you both shared, right? Bringing on different personas to add to the value chain, operationalizing the life cycle. Many organizations are leveraging AI to drive efficiency, and it seems like both of you have been using Dataiku to drive efficiency in your AI, so that's excellent. But both of you have undergone a lot of change in your organizations, right? And digital transformation is all about change. So let's share with the group a little bit about what that change management journey has been like, and how have you secured buy-in and overcome some of those challenges. And Thesri, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so change is not easy, right? Especially in big organizations. I think for particularly banking world, the digital sort of change where client-facing was driven by demand. So that was, I think, more seamless than what we're going through internally. The digital transformation of internal consumption, where sort of analytics plays a key role. And the idea is that the partners that I enable were very used to a transactional relationship with us. And now it is a partnership. How do we sort of solve problems together? So that line between sort of technology, data science, analytics is blurring. And the idea that we are one team was the most difficult part of that change management, right? There's things that we had to completely change around the operating model. What has helped is, I think, two things. One is the idea that the business users are becoming more and more informed about technology, right? And the ability to showcase value through this standardized journey. Once you're able to do that once, you see other people coming and knocking at the door. They're saying, okay, this is standardized, this is cookie cutter, we can repeat this. The other thing is that the new adopters are coming in with no preconceived idea of this transactional relationship, which is great. So any net new teams that we're starting to work with, the change management is much easier. The idea that as individuals, we're expecting similar experiences at work as in our personal life, right? Like, so if I have pictures on my iPhone, I can sort of scroll on my iPad, on my Mac. Why can't I do that with my data? Like, if I can use the data to visualize, why can't I query that data? Why can't I use that data for modeling? I think that need for that seamless experience is making sort of change management easier for us. And again, like, Dataiku is sort of underlining that for our analytical journey.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that work you did in mapping out and prescribing that user journey was very, very helpful in taking that friction away early on. If any of you were in my early session this morning, I talked a little bit about the value of an ambassador network, right, where folks can share their success and really highlight the work they've done. And I think BMO's done a great job through your operating model of really talking about that early success so that it's not really risky to come on board. It's kind of like not being the first one to a party, but showing up to a really bumping party, if that's what kids are still saying these days. I wouldn't know. Hello, how about you? How's change management going at Reach?
So I believe in meeting people where they're at. And it hasn't been more than a few years that people have started to understand that they need to think probabilistically rather than factually. A lot of the culture change, if I want to be able to talk to you in terms of AI, ML, I need you to understand that when I say I predict something to be X, I mean I'm pretty sure, but not 100% sure. So a lot of the change in attitude, change in acceptance, and even what Maurice was talking about, getting your stakeholders' trust, the business's trust, pivoted around making sure that people think about problems differently. I can bat 95% of the time, but if I'm wrong once and it's something big that I was wrong about, people might lose trust. So if you don't understand how that works, you won't adopt. You won't come with me on this journey. If I can convince you to think probabilistically, and truth be told, anyone in their life makes these probabilistic choices, it becomes a lot easier to introduce AI concepts to you. It becomes a lot easier to have buy-in for what does that number or what does that prediction on your screen actually mean, and how we're going to take action, how are we going to manage the risk if we're wrong, et cetera, et cetera. One step at a time, low-hanging fruit. That's how we get the trust and try and understand how people think about those problems and teach them to think probabilistically.
I think you can tell Lo is one of the most trustworthy people you can know. Always kind and looking to bring people on board. But I think that piece around meeting people where they're at is very important. New things can be scary, as we're learning. But with the pace of change, if top-down leadership approaches or top-down directions don't work anymore, our users and our business users especially are so much more informed that leveraging that low-hanging fruit, bringing them on board, and then building from there is the key to success. Okay, so this is why everyone's here, is business value and how it's being measured. How are you, I imagine you're earning that trust through business value. How are you measuring it? Is it resonating with stakeholders? What does that look like? And Lo, I'll start with you.
Sure. So obviously there are things that we do at Reach that takes advantage of Dataiku and ML and the large data sets that we have. I think the better, more tangible example is at my previous role where I worked for a company called Blackline Safety. They manufactured these sensors. So there's just an IoT company that has connected devices, the sensors send data. And like I was saying in the story, I was actually brought on to try and unlock that value in 2016. And I was pretty frustrated because the cost didn't actually make sense. So what am I going to pitch to the board? That we're just going to do this and trust me? That never flies. The use case that we actually used was what is now the stock example of predictive analytics, which is when will a sensor fail? I want to underline that we didn't start by building models. We actually started by understanding the data. Hey, how much voltage do we have to put in a sensor? What type of current do we see? What's the sensitivity? How do we measure it? Understanding the subject matter and the context. And rather than diving into the large amounts of data and building models, we actually use simple analytics to figure out, hey, can we do better? Can we predict with a specific type of error bars when sensors are going to fail? Can we guess it within 6 months, let's say? After doing that, we did a basic ROI analysis that showed, yeah, we're doing incrementally better. Within error, we're doing better. That was when we decided to put all of our resources and actually build something, a production AI model that takes data from the field and tries to detect every day what are the chances of a sensor failing. I think, obviously, coming up with a model and building it is very exciting and a very hard part. I would say the hardest part was actually implementing it within the business, finding the abstraction point within the business that we can actually take an action so that I can get some trust and some political capital to do something better and bigger. And that's when I introduced a little field in an Excel sheet that our support team used that was just sensor risk. I filled it up statistically to begin with, went through the change management process. This was all before we even trained a model. So define an abstraction point in the business. I'm filling it in just manually with some statistics. Then when we developed the model, I just switched it, and without any sort of overhead, everyone was using it without knowing that they're using it. And then presented it, hey, look, as soon as we switched from manual to this AI model, our false negatives have gone down, our false positives have gone up, et cetera, et cetera. So now it makes financial sense. That was the beginning of the journey. That was let's do this.
And there were multiple points of value in your journey. It was reducing downtime, right, which impacts customer experience, being able to reduce chances of lost revenue or increasing revenue, but also just like driving efficiency in the business, right? So it's not just one metric you're chasing. There's multiple. Yeah.
The more we looked at it, the more value there was than the hard dollars. We reduced the overhead of our technical support team that was actually looking at the sensors and testing it. The customers became happier. Obviously, there was a marketing spin to it that we're using AI and you're getting your sensors on time. But none of them, we gave lifetime warranty of these sensors. Maybe I should have mentioned that at the beginning. That's a pretty important part. So we paid for every sensor that we didn't manufacture well, and we manufactured everything in-house. So if we have a lifetime warranty, we want to reduce the cost to us. We want to figure out what manufacturing practices were good or bad. There was just so much that came out of this simple trying to figure out when sensors fail, so we reduce the downtime of the clients that we had.
Thank you. Now, Thaispeer, with your organization business being different, I imagine the way you're measuring value and success is different. So I'd love to hear how you guys are doing it at BMO.
It is, but I think one thing that I subscribe to, and so our organization as well, is what is being measured as a success for business hasn't changed. How you measure it is different with sort of AI and Gen AI. So essentially, like shareholder value maximization, which sort of revenue uplifts, cutting down cost, productivity. I think those are still sort of the focus, and that's how success is defined and measured. Now, when initiatives which are heavy on sort of predictive analytics, AI and Gen AI, we are sort of changing how we measure. We had this conversation earlier in Exec Connect as well. For Gen AI, I think Gen AI FinOps is very new, and I think it's low on the maturity curve. So things like adoption, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, reduction in time to insights, particularly for my team. That's how we are sort of measuring success for the latest sort of and greatest, the Gen AI use cases. But even for some AI and predictive use cases, the idea is how is it contributing to those metrics that the businesses have always been tracking. But then there's a flavor to it. So one of my teammates gave me a great example was if we put a model out in production which is giving out leads for cold calling, for conversion of mortgages, and is giving a 90% accuracy, but only gives out 5 leads, and we have one person dedicated making those phone calls, this person is only making sort of a 4% conversion in a day. So isn't it better to have a model that gives out sort of 10 predictions at 70% accuracy, right? So I think you have to sort of fine-tune some of the things, but we haven't changed what we are measuring.
Yeah, and I was, when Nigel was presenting on why AI projects fail, I think the first one was stakeholders misunderstand how AI can impact the business or how it should impact the business. And so this initial intake of what does our business need, will this help achieve it, what's the end goal, is a really, really important question to ask because that's how you see where and how you will get the best return on your investment. Okay, now let's look forward because you guys are going to be Dataiku customers forever. As we look forward and we start planning our joint success together over the next 18 months, what's top of mind? What are you going to call me up and say, Jag, this is what we need to work on and get to it pronto? I'm going to start with you, Desveer.
So no surprises for big organizations, right? Like so number one is this vector of data moving to cloud, right? So data is moving to cloud, consumption has to follow, and it obviously brings the horizontal scalability advantage with it. So I think that's a big focus for us. On how to time it and how to go about that journey. And Dataiku has a big role to play in that. And the second one, again, should not be a surprise for everybody who's been here, has been sort of, as we all start looking at Gen AI, how do we do that in a governed manner? So that trust, the governance around experimentation, nobody wants to be left behind, but given operating in such a regulated environment, how do we do it so that we don't get burnt?
So that was actually going to be like part of my second question as well. So Lo, I'm going to ask you what you're focused on, and then I might just skip Desveer for the next question. So what do the next 18 months look like?
I think it was the very first thing that was presented here. How do we reduce the life cycle of question to answer, the time to value? And to be able to achieve that, how do you use the agent model or these micro models that are trained on a subset of the data and making it user-friendly and available to your users? If I want my company to not, for the data team of my company to not scale with the size of the company linearly, as in for every 100 people that I hire, I got to hire 10 data analysts. I got to put the power of answering those questions in their hands so they can just go and manage the easy questions or small questions themselves and give us the big stuff. That's the transition that we're in, trying to put these large language models, these agents, these chatbots, train them on our data, our secret sauce, as it was said, and then put it in the hands of the business users.
Now, Desveer touched a little bit on risk and governance. I'm going to ask you, what are you guys, there's a lot of hype, but a lot of fear as well. So what are you guys doing to future-proof or risk-proof these efforts?
So I always joke about there are Googleable and ungoogleable problems, and there are solved and unsolved problems. Googleable problems are things you go into Google, you put it in there, the architecture and the framework is right there, and you just do it. Ungoogleable is you put it in Google and nothing pops out, which as data scientists have noticed, that's most of our cases. Solve problems are things that you know for a given data set, for a known data set, what the output should be, and unsolved problems are hypothesis testing. You just don't know what you're going to get. We have policies around not using LLMs, ChatGPT, anything of that nature for ungoogleable, unsolved problems, period. There is no chance that you should be or you're allowed to use that in project work. However, for solved and Googleable problems, where it just takes you hours and hours to read something or parse something, we encourage people to greatly use it. So that includes summarizing stuff, that includes going through the 20th page of a Google search, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And it's not very different from what we saw, early in the enterprise AI world, where many teams were more likely to look at supervised learning problems before unsupervised learning problems. So it's what we've been doing for a long time, but just as a larger scale. I know that you talked about governance in place. Is there anything else in particular that the bank is looking at right now to make sure that Gen AI is being rolled out in a safe way?
Predominantly, like everything else, right? The input data and a lot of focus on, like when we say governed, the bank sort of has 11 to 12 risk teams looking at every use case. And obviously, it's also looking at sort of what technology we want to use. So I think that's why I said it's very early days in the regulated environment. But to the speaker earlier, right? Like, we don't want to be the lower graph, right? So everybody wants to capture on that competitive advantage. So I think it is, in my opinion, overhyped in near future, but undervalued in the long term, right? So I think if we don't ride the hype now, then we'll be left behind, and that's what the bank is focused on.
Absolutely. Okay, this last question is the last one between us and happy hour. You're also our last speakers of the day, so I'm tasking you with leaving the crowd with your words of wisdom. So for everyone in the room who's looking to implement a great change, to measure value, to leverage Gen AI, what is your word of advice? And I'm going to start with you, Thesbir.
So I'll repeat myself so that we can get out and have a drink. I think for data leaders, ride the hype, but be very conscious that we're building foundations, and just Gen AI in itself will not deliver the business value that we are looking for. It will change certain operating models, certain processes. So the use cases where we can disrupt those processes is where we will be able to showcase real business value, and that will sort of start that cycle of generating value. So I think that should be the focus. Ride the wave, it's a great time, but be conscious that we're doing that.
I don't have wisdom. I'm just a guy that stumbles through life and tries to figure things out. I think what I figured out is you got to start small, and even though you're aiming high, don't try and solve world's problems with one project. Show results, start with the low-hanging fruit, make sure you understand what your results mean and what success looks like in the organization that you're in. If you start small, the path ahead is going to be years and years long.
Thanks, Lo. Thanks, Thesbir. You both make Team Canada very proud.
Thank you.